Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Tatiana and me are very happy to be part of the UTICamp 2020, and we would like to be physically present, but unfortunately it was not possible this year. I hope we will be physically there next year. So our presentation today is about Simplified Technical English, ASD ST100, and its potential interaction with the Russian language and in technical writing and translation. So at the end, we'll see some practical examples, and we'll do mine in English, and Tatiana will do hers in Russian. If you can start with the presentation. This is something about us. We are both part of the same group, the Simplified Technical English Maintenance Group. We are working together for the same scope, maintaining the standard, Simplified Technical English. So I work for an aerospace company in Italy, and Tatiana is a professor of the GIMO University in Moscow, Russia, and she is also the national representative in Simplified Technical English Maintenance Group. Next one. So let's start this presentation with the definition of national control languages taken from Wikipedia. As we can see, the text is short, but the content is very important. So we can read that control natural languages are a subset of natural languages that are obtained by restricting the grammar and vocabulary in order to reduce or eliminate with complexity. So this is important. Beside this definition, we can see that Simplified Technical English is the first reference below, highlighted in green, and then there is also Caterpillar Technical English. We will talk about that. And also there is a reference to semi-automatic translation of documentation. So this essentially links with the purpose of our presentation today. In the next slide, we can see some information about ASD. So ASD is the owner of the specification. It stands for Aerospace and Defense Industry Association of Europe. So it's an association of aerospace industries and defense. In the past, when it was called ECMA, was just only aerospace, and then the two other parts merged together to form a huge association which includes 23 national association members, 18 countries, and altogether they have almost 1 million people working in these branches of industries. ASD is based in Brussels, in Belgium. And in the next slide, we will analyze the name of the specification itself, which is ASD ST100. But I will start from the subtitle, which says International Specification for the Preparation of Technical Documentation in a Control Language. So you can see that we are linking to control language, as I was saying before. So then let's analyze each single word. ASD is actually what we saw before. It's the association owner of the specification. STE, Simplified Technical English. Simplified is intended to simplify the language, especially for non-native speaker. Technical because it is intended for technical text, and English because English is the international language of engineering and science. And why 100? 100 has been assigned by us, by the STMG, as a tribute to the ATA 100, which was the first international specification, which in 1987 included the requirements to use simplified technical English in maintenance manual. ATA stands for Air Transport Association of America. So in the next 3 slides, we will see a very short summary of the history of simplified technical English, which starts, as we see, at the end of the 70s on a specific request from the European airlines. So you can see that the Association of European Airlines asked ECMA, the previous association before ASD, to investigate reality of maintenance documentation in the civil aircraft industry and to find a solution to simplify the language to write such documentation. So ECMA asked the equivalent association in the United States, which is called the Aerospace Association of AIA of America, to assist in the projects. 2 groups, one from ECMA and one from AIA, were formed for the scope, and these 2 groups explored all the existing manuals and control language, and they came to the conclusion that there was a need to have a simplified language to be used in aerospace. So in 1983, in Amsterdam, the ECMA Simplified English project started, and the first intention of the fathers of Simplified Technical English was to create, I would say, not to invent the wheel, but to simply transfer the concepts of something which was already existing into the aerospace need and in the aerospace domain. So it was actually 2 models were taken into account and inspired the work. One was the Caterpillar Fundamental English, or CFE, which was used to define the writing rules, and then for the second part, for the dictionary, another document was taken into account, which was created by McDonnell Douglas, which is now Boeing, and it consisted in a technical list of terms, a technical dictionary that was that inspired the creation of the Simplified Technical English Dictionary. So the result of the effort was the ECMA Simplified English Guide, after 3 years of work from 1983 to 1986, and you can see that from a simple guide, we moved subsequently in 2005 to create an international specification, which is the one we are having now. So this is briefly the history of Simplified Technical English. In the next slide, I summarized some concepts, some basic principles. So what does the specification give to the technical authors? I would say that the structure is exactly replicating the concept of a pioneer of control language, which was was called Basic English and was created in the 30s. And we have 9 sections and 53 writing rules in part 1. And then we have a control vocabulary of 864 approved words. So it is intended to make the technical text easy to understand by everyone, especially the non-native English speakers. And it has a control language, control vocabulary with sufficient words to write all technical sentences. And I would say, I'm not reading through everything, but I would say that it incorporates the main feature of flexibility. Flexibility means that it can be adapted at all the domains completely different from the intended domain of aerospace. So flexibility is, I would say, the most important feature, because you can add to the basic vocabulary, you can add some categories of terminology, which we call technical names and technical verbs, that can be applicable to every. And we will see later about the usage of simplified technical English, which is summarized in the next slides. You can see that although it was developed for aerospace and for the aviation industry, it is now a requirement which is used in such domain, and this is required by the 2 major specifications that are used to write manuals in that domain, which is S1000D and ATA, the former ATA 100, which is now called 2200. So if you can show the next slide, we can see that today simplified technical English users are located mainly outside aerospace and defense, with 54% are outside, and we can also copies of the specification have been requested by 113 different countries worldwide, 63% outside Europe. And then we have more than 300 universities worldwide with copies, and they include the study of simplified technical English, or they wanted to include the study of simplified technical English into their programs. And then, of course, there are many important companies in various sector industries. In the next slide, we can see the first 30 positions of distributed copies. This is based on the latest version, issue 7, which has been released almost 4 years ago. And what I can remark here is that at the end of 2019, China was in position number 14, and now we can see that in position number 2. And it happened that the Civil Aviation Administration of China issued a directive and, to use simplified technical English as a reference to get the aircraft maintainer license. So all Chinese airlines and maintenance centers started a massive request of copies, which brought China, as I was saying, from position 14 to position number 2. And this is still ongoing, this massive requests. So it is actually a success for us, for the STE standard being recognized in such official way. And you can also see at the end that Ukraine is positioned on the last position, number 30, which is not bad in any case, because this is just only a portion of 113 countries. And then in the next, you can see the distribution by continents. The distribution by continents is, you can see that Europe is in the first place with 36%, and then it's followed by North America with 25%. And then we have also Asia with 21%. And the growing of Asia is linked to the growing of China. So if you can show that, that's it. And we have also Pacific, and then we have South America, and at the end we have Africa. In the next one, which is, this is very interesting, because we can see in which fields of activities the STE users are located and distributed. So it is very significant, the position number 2, related to language services, translation and technical documentation in general. Then also we have information technology and IT, high-tech software and telecommunication, and then also we have the academic centers, universities in just after the airlines. Then also we have automotive, railways, transportation. We have different types of industries grouped into the others category, and then we have mechanical engineering, manufacturing, processes, energy, oil, gas, electricity, nuclear, mining, etc., medical and healthcare, and then we have private use and industrial machinery. So this is basically the scenario of the users. In the next slide, we can see that also linked to the presence today here of Tatiana and me, there is the STMG, the Simplified Technical Maintenance Group, which is the group in charge to control and maintain the STE specifications. So throughout the years, we have we took care of a total of 15 releases of the specification, changes, issues, revisions, and we had 81 working meetings and held in 12 countries in 22 cities. So the next issue, we are working on the next issue, which is expected to be released next year at the end of April. We are having the difficulties in having meetings due to the COVID-19, but we will meet the target anyway, because the new specification, the new issue is on its way. So in the next slide, you can see the companies, the organization and countries that are part of the STMG today, including some associate members, which are representing the airlines. And this is important to have a representation of the end user. You may remember at the beginning I said that this specification was written on a request from the airlines, and we still have 3 airlines within our group. But in the next slide, we can see the creation of this language and many years ago. So it is actually an old project until recently discovered by other potential users. So for more than 30 years, STE was confined in the walls of aviation maintenance only, and only with the starting of issue 6 in 2013, the specification was made available free of charge to everyone. So starting from that point, it was the requests for copies dramatically increased. So other industries outside aviation became attracted, academic world, university, technical colleges, language schools became attracted, translation world became attracted, presentation and speeches were requested in several important conferences every year, and STE became the starting point for other control languages. And this is interesting because it is related to our presentation today. So the need to know about STE is constantly increasing. And so how can it be applicable to translation? There are, of course, tremendous benefits that control language can have in the translation process. So when STE was created, one of its primary objectives was to make translation easier. So this is based on the principle that if the vocabulary, the meaning of words and types of sentence constructions are controlled, the variation between texts will be minimal. So thus it is easier for translators or translating engines to translate texts written in one control language into a target language. So besides, STE is a paramount important and customized terminology database that includes the technical terms, so technical names and technical verbs. So a translator should be able to translate the text written in another language into STE, or translate the text written in STE into another language. So the second option is what we are discussing today, because it can result in future opportunities of a localized version in other simplified technical English languages. And my last slide before I give the microphone to Tatiana is that 2 years ago, in 2018, the STMG, the entire STMG, so also Tatiana and me, were invited to speak in the first World Forum of National Control Languages, which took place in Florence. And during the days of the forums, many existing control languages were presented and discussed, including some which are referenced in this slide. The creation of a control language, which is based on the principle of simplified technical English, could have enormous positive impacts on translation. And one of these major examples was the simplified control Spanish, which was created as a sort of mirror of simplified technical English. So as we can see how, a language, for example, like Russian, which is currently not entirely controlled, can get benefits of possible future controlled version based on the STE principle in the same way as the Spanish control language. So, and this is what Tatiana will explain in the second part of the presentation. So this concludes my part, and I pass the microphone to Tatiana for the very interesting second part about Russian. Thank you.
Hello UTICamp, thanks for the possibility to join this conference in this unusual online format, but we still have this capability of being partially present today. What we're going to be discussing is how Russian language, well, is not the simplest one for technical documentation, can be used for standards development based on the simplified technical English. And correspondingly, what points, issues, details, terms can be of aid in our technical translations to make it closer to our technical standards, in translating technical standards, to make our translations less ambiguous and more understandable and comprehensible, because as Orlando mentioned, this is one of the key goals and aims for the standard technical English, whether it's applied to the aviation industry or other industries where the standard is used. The interest towards the standard is growing, is booming, and it's expanded into other areas and industries that are in a way, in this or that way, related to working with people and our overall security and safety. So here comes a question: can you make Russian language controlled based on its structure, based on its build? Russian language is different from other languages. And in 2018, there was an interesting linguistical moment. So what I think is important to be highlighted here, and maybe to discuss here again with you, that includes differences in mentality. For example, the negativism that is transferred, as Russian language speakers, that is transferred from our brain into our translation. We are being brought up in a way that all of our recommendations, all the informational signs, they contain some sort of a prohibition. Fortunately, I am really pleased to see that these signs, informational signs, become more and more loyal and comprehensible for the audience. But still, from the very childhood, we're hearing: do not run, do not step on the green grass, do not touch the paintings. So in our area, you can almost think that in our area, in our mentality, just like in this slide, almost everything is prohibited. And when we're starting technical translation, when we're switching into this industry, we can transfer this negativity, and we need to control that. We need to control that internally in ourselves. We have to understand this is less of a feature for English, because all the recommendations, all the prohibitions, all the informational messages are formed as positive statements. Because if it's this is something that is translated in.
So, respect to the example which we can observe on the lower part of the slide, in the red square there is such kind of example of what we can talk about right now. Moreover, the usage of the exclamatory sign adds some imperativity and imperativity to the statement, and not ability to and avoids any flexibility, make some direct statements. And the most widespread difficulty you have all come across, that is a load of nouns in sentences, which is quite peculiar for any official or governmental language of any topicality. The same tendency can be observed in the technical Russian language. For example, such a segment where the power regulator is described may contain a lot of phrases, a lot of sentences. So we should use more adjectives, more infinitive constructions, avoid noun clusters, as we are talking about the application of standard technical English as to the work in translating from Russian into English and vice versa. We have to try to understand and make it clear to the native speakers and non-native speakers. Moreover, this loading of nouns is accompanied with different grammatical structures, which prevents from understanding information in general. Besides this, the sentence which you can see on the upper side of our slide contains 27 words, which is too much. It exceeds the recommended number of words. The recommendation states the usage of 20 words in one sentence is the maximum, which makes the sentence more clear and more vivid for understanding. And this is one of the examples which should be applied while translating from English into Russian. And another interesting point which differs the formulages of translation from English into Russian, that bases which exist in Russian can be omitted in Russian, and we should remember it, that some things may be omitted. Another interesting point about the usage of personal pronouns, which are quite peculiar in English texts, in English manuals, guides, technical documentations, which are excluded from Russian documents, respectively. Despite all the existing rules, which have been described for quite a while and exist for quite a long, and anybody can refer from the technical translators, we still come across in the internet a big number of different opinions on how to use them, and here are the recommendations. You can see them. So here are some repetitions: the usage of personal pronouns, which we still see in sentences, and they should be avoided. Even it will not cause to the loss of information, and it needs some stylistic adaptation. So the shorter the sentences, recommendations, manuals, guides, the better it is. Especially the last point, which literally is translated: when you reach the last function, press button F, and so on and so forth, which is quite. Another complication are two extended and long sentences, which you can see here in Russian. It exceeds the number of words, 21, and while translating into English, our sentence, as we know, is reduced in size, but still it is better to process it, to evaluate it in Russian, for us to make the work while translating into English much simpler. And of course, the off phrases which are characteristic for political context and technical are not quite peculiar for technical text here. So the chain of nouns and adjectives, that is the option we should aim for while translating, avoiding too many noun clusters. Apart from that, referring back to the point that all the technical documents should be translated for the maximum avoidance of ambiguity, for avoidance of some unclear things. For example, the usage, as in the sentence, "Don't stand close to the barrier and don't allow children, people, or anybody else do this, especially during its work." It's quite unclear what means its work, whose work, the barrier's work or the people's work. We can hardly expect all the auditorium described in the instruction in this guide to understand what the instruction really means, not the appropriate way of information. Another grammatical point which makes the difference between English and Russian, that is the usage of the future tense, where it is used In English, it is used for the present, and will can be used for some other purposes. And another point is related to the usage of possessive pronouns, which we have already mentioned a bit. In Russian, we have a tendency of its omittance, while there is a great use of them in English. Another aspect which is quite ambiguous, it's quite complicated while used in the sentences, that is punctuation. The punctuation in English and Russian are different. It's a separate topic for discussion. Unfortunately, it is not widely taught, it is not widely discussed in the academic sphere, in educational sphere. Still, this question is of greater interest nowadays. A lot of attention is paid to it nowadays. Here we can see two examples of translation. Sometimes the omittance of the punctuation of commas may lead to the differences of sense, or sometimes it may alter the content totally, alter the meaning totally. That is why we should also remember about the so-called Oxford comma, whether it is and where exactly it is applicable, for us not to get into the situation as indicated here on this quite clear slide, clear for understanding. Moreover, there is a category of so well-known false words, false friends, and a lot of phrases, a lot of words which are used in different spheres, but we should be careful with their usage. Besides such words as characteristics, which sometimes may be used in the meaning of behavior. When we are thinking about the word characteristics in Russian, it may mean quite different, and other big number of enemies of the translator, false friends of the translator. I appreciate the work of my colleague for recommending me these terms for the discussion, because those are the terms and quite frequent mistakes, frequent drawbacks which can be made while translating from English into Russian and vice versa, which are irrelevant due to the terminological application, because the word object may be translated wrong, and also the word classification. As a technical translator, I quite often come across this word in different places, in different meanings, but we should bear in mind that we should apply the word categorization in this sense, in the sense of the Russian classification meaning. That is why we should choose from the chain of words the most appropriate, the most applicable for this or that text, to make the better perception of the text. For us to sum up all the information which has been discussed with us, all the things which we have discussed with you, there are many more complications, many more difficulties in Russian and English, while interaction of Russian and English in the sense of technical. The question is whether it is possible to create Russian for it to be controlled, for it to be simplified as the simplified English. I think it is possible, and I truly hope that some moment the simplified Russian will be developed. and we work with colleagues who are also in the technical translation. We discuss this possibility, and I do believe that one day we will gather together in order to create such simplified Russian. We shall create the national version of the simplified Russian. One of our colleagues is involved in the standardization of Japanese, so I think he will be quite helpful. What can we do in order to control Russian as to the technical typicality? I want to underline that we should remember the restrictions about the number of words in the sentence. We make the simplified syntaxes. We should substitute nouns into adjectives and verbs, the noun clusters, long noun clusters, and make the sentences sound more logical. For the sentences, modified sentences in Russian, to correlate with English better. Besides this, the terminological unity should be kept. Orlando and I, we have prepared a couple of samples, a couple of examples, how the simplified technical English helps in translation. We have made some experiments in machine translation in order to demonstrate the way the technical English helps to use machine translation and make it more clear and understandable. Of course, we are not too courageous to state that it is a unique instrument which doesn't need any improvement. As I have heard from the previous colleagues' reports, I can tell that this topic is quite acute. It is widely discussed in our translation community. But apart from that, if the text looks very structured and simple in the source language, please agree with me that it is quite easy for translation.
So, we've picked out several simple, basic texts without going into the main topics that actually resulted in simplified English to be created. It's not an airspace or aviation. This is something that we all understand, and Orlando, naturally, as a fan of a good coffee, insisted on those examples being picked up from the instructions of several coffee machines to produce mocha. So this is the source text that we have in English, and we will put it into simplified English version. You can see it's well structured, quite logical. There are no sentences that are too long, no structures that are overloaded either. So if we use this, we use Google Translate to translate this, we've received a result that is quite bearable, I must say, despite certain segments that need stylistic polishing or maybe wording change. But as you can see, for this size of a text, there's not too many points that require corrections. Moreover, we've decided to have a look at the results for a different text that has a different structure to make our experiment wider and not to stick with the same long text, because when it comes to comprehensiveness of machine translation, comprehensibility of machine translation, longer texts result in other results. So the results are as follows. There's structure is not ideal. There are several additional punctuation marks, and you can see some of the structures that are used here are not ideal too. This happens. Those terms that the machine translation doesn't know or cannot recognize. I believe you've experienced this on your own too. You've encountered a situation like this. So you can see that usage of simplified technical English we'll still need machine translation post editing performed by a human even for those texts. You cannot avoid that. Next, similar texts. These are the text and instructions. This kind of text and instructions were used for these examples. The topic is absolutely the same. Coffee machines. It's a pretty basic, common structure, really clear. There are no difficult wordings here, nor no difficult sentences. So the text is mostly quite clear and comprehensive in the result. Of course, there are certain bits and pieces that might need some changes, but overall, in this regard, we're facing with pretty decent results. If we're using this translated text and then apply the simplified technical English standards to adapt it, you can see that those sentences become more brief, they become shorter, and typical structures appear. That is also quite a feature of instructions that make them more clear, and the text becomes more logical. And this is the result that we've achieved using Google into Russian. Of course, this is not ideal too. We see there are some additional punctuation marks, like quotation marks, that should not be in the text. And you can see the coffee machine becomes a coffee maker, and then again a coffee machine, so there is a bit of a consistency issue in terms of terminology. So there are certain points that we need to address when we are going to polish this text. And another example, another sample text that we've used in this experiment to translate from Russian. So this is the result that we achieve by translating it into English. And then what it becomes after we apply the STE rules and standards to it. It's more visually well structured, it's more brief. And the text that comes after applying STE and then translating it into after translating it with Google into Russian. Naturally, there are certain rough spots or certain wonderful pieces like marks of punctuation that machine translation just decided to add for whatever reason. But the general meaning of the text is maintained. So Naturally, Russian can hardly be classified as one of the easier languages to adapt to the STE standards, but I hope this task is achievable, is realistic, and we will be striving towards this goal, and using those rules and recommendations that we've managed to highlight today will help us. If you have any practical examples or your translator's experience that might be useful to us, it will be really helpful to us to hear it. You can always contact us via those emails indicated there, and if you're interested in this standard, you can open the official web page and request a free copy of that standard to study it more carefully. And if you have any deeper interest, if you're more interested in this topic, we are inviting you to join the introductory course on this technical standard. One of those courses is planned in the near future, and you'll be welcome to join it. In any case, we'll be happy to hear your feedback. Contact us. Thank you for your attention. I hope we did not hold you off your lunchtime for too long. I hope the coffee topic was quite interesting for everybody. Thank you. Orlando, thanks Tatiana. If there's any questions from the online or maybe from the audience. Okay, we have one. We have one question, and then it's time for us to leave. Good morning. I have a question to Tatiana. That's why I'll ask it in Russian. My name is Igor. I'm into technical editing. Thanks for this wonderful presentation and this overview of technical mistakes that I encounter quite often. My question is regarding the word "please" in technical texts, to the reality of what you've mentioned initially. So, because we're all being banned and prohibited from doing certain things, do you think we'll be able to use? We'll be able to get this right, win this right to use this word "please" in technical texts. Well, Igor, thanks for your question. It's a very interesting one. When it comes to mentality, when it comes to technical translation overall, I think sooner or later we'll come to this, because if you observe the trend in informational science, they become a bit more warmer, a bit more human with time. So those wordings become more and more pleasant to read. So I see it in the foreseeable future. We'll be able to use this structure in to that extent and in those areas that actually allow this. So I think it's possible, because as long as it doesn't make the text overloaded. What do you think? Yeah, well, I hope that we will achieve that, because without it, especially when you receive text from a translator who is not as tech savvy, you just have to replace the word "please" with an empty space by doing auto replacement, because, for example, that translator was doing marketing translation in the past. In my personal opinion, the word "please," "пожалуйста" sounds really good, but you cannot.
Hope to see you sometime, some next UTIC here in person.
Thank you so much.